everyone. My name is Leticia Marquez, and I'm a MAKEMO librarian with LA County Library. I welcome you to Advanced Topics in Microsoft Excel. Before we get going with today's event, I will take care of some housekeeping, do the land acknowledgement, and tell you what we have coming up next with our Microsoft Office workshops. So if you can hear me and see the slide up on the screen, then you are good to go. However, if you are having trouble hearing me or seeing me or the slide, do let me know in the chat and I will do my best to assist. If you would like to listen to this presentation on the phone, you can do that by calling 1-669-900-6833 and using the access code 836-6955-0106 and passcode 123123. Additionally, automated closed captioning is available on Zoom in case you would like to read along with the presentation. To enable that, you would press the CC button in your Zoom window. You may have noticed that the mics and video are disabled for attendees. That is so everyone can focus on our presenter. We do, however, welcome your questions and comments. Questions should go into the Q&A box and comments can go in the chat. I would also like to note that this class is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the YouTube link in a follow-up email. I will now move on to our land acknowledgement. So the County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge the settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandeño Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrieleño Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation, Yahaviatam of San Manuel Nation, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians, Coastal Band of Chumash Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Tribe. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanaic.lacounty.gov. We'll be posting that to the chat. Before we begin, I'd like to mention our next program in our Microsoft Office workshop series will be Microsoft PowerPoint for Beginners on Wednesday, March 4th at 11 a.m. Lack of PowerPoint knowledge holding you back? In this approachable class, we'll get you started by teaching you to make a photo slideshow, create a short informational presentation, and build a deck of flashcards for studying. The class is free, and I will be posting that link to the chat as well. Okay, so if you would like to learn more about our virtual or in-person events, head over to lacountylibrary.org and click the events link in the middle of the navigation bar at the top of the page. And so now it's time to get into advanced topics for Microsoft Excel. Your presenter for today is Oleg Kagan, Community Engagement Coordinator for LA County Library. Oleg, the stage is yours.
Letty, thank you very much. And for the folks out there, this is Letty's first virtual event. So if we can give her a virtual round of applause, that was a very good introduction, and I appreciate it. So we are all here for advanced topics in Excel. And I got to tell you, this was not an easy class to put together because Excel is a complicated piece of software, as you all know if you're here. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to kind of get started here, slowly working our way up into our demo and then some formulas. So I am curious, while I share my screen, where are we all when it comes to Excel? Would you consider yourself an advanced user, an intermediate user, or a beginner here? Just seeing, getting a little taste of what's possible. Let me know in the chat. I see intermediate, intermediate, beginner, intermediate. Oh, we got an advanced person. I'm a little scared, honestly. Advanced, oh, advanced to very advanced. Oh, this is going to be good. If you see that I've done something that's inefficient or could be better, put it in the chat so I can improve. Somebody mentioned I use it daily, but looking to advance my skills. That's where I am. Heavy user, but not sophisticated. Yeah, I see. So I would say the majority of the folks here, we currently have 124 people in our session. Um, the majority of the people are intermediate, and there are a few advanced and a few beginners sprinkled in. For the beginners, you're welcome to go along for the ride, but it may not be easy to hold on to the boat. So let me go ahead and just bring up a bit of a PowerPoint out here. So it's an Excel class. We also have a PowerPoint presentation. Me personally, I would say I'm an intermediate user of PowerPoint, advanced in some parts, but again, it depends on who you ask. And somebody just asked the perfect question in the chat. Is there a test to give us a score on our ability? I think it's hard to self-assess. You have anticipated exactly what I'm going to say. And the fact is that there is no test. Excel, or at least advancement in Excel, is very much like a roundabout. Most of us are somewhere in the middle here. You start off kind of with the basics, inputting stuff into cells, being able to write very simple functions, sums and averages, maybe create a table and structure something as a table, move some rows and columns around. And then as you get more advanced, maybe you're doing something at work or you're just interested in Excel and you're playing around with it at home, you move out a little bit more right here where you dip your toe into pivot tables. You start to kind of manipulate the functions a little bit more. Maybe you nest a function in another function. Maybe you create a heat map in Excel. Maybe you work with a very large or a medium large data set. You feel really comfortable in Excel. You know some keyboard shortcuts. You're an intermediate user. You're looking ahead into the horizon, going, what could be out there? I'm mixing my metaphors, but that's okay. The fact is that most of us are in this area here. And when it comes to Excel advanced use, there isn't one path. It really depends on what you're using it for. So if you are in the finance industry, you may be getting deep into financial modeling and you're going to use the functions and you're going to build formulas and structure your spreadsheets in a way that's going to be helpful for financial modeling or data analysis. You're going to get deep into cleaning data, organizing it, and presenting it in a way that will help decision makers in your organization gain insights from that data. There are some people who create art in Microsoft Excel. It may be a surprise to you, but there are some pretty wild and interesting things that people have created in Microsoft Excel in terms of aesthetics. Maybe you're a business analyst, maybe you're a project manager using Excel. Each of those areas and other areas that can be used, that Excel can be used for, all have their advanced path. What I'm going to be doing today is not so much focusing on any one, but giving you a taste of that. Now, most people who are beginner moving into intermediate, into trying to think about advanced, start it this way. They start to watch YouTube videos, read books, maybe looked at a LinkedIn Learning class and start to pick up different functions. You start to kind of be like, well, the equivalent of being higher level in Excel is to know what the filter function is to know how to use XLOOKUP, or if you're using older versions of Excel, VLOOKUP or index match. There's a bit of a controversy between the lookups and index match. You start to memorize a lot of functions and you look at YouTube videos and everything, and you're like, is this advanced in Excel? In my opinion, it's not. There are roughly 500 functions in Excel. Some of them are very specific, some of them are more general and applicable to a lot of different areas. The fact is that becoming advanced in Excel isn't memorizing functions necessarily, but understanding how they all come together. Each function is a building block of bigger formulas of how you do something. So it's really about understanding how the domain that you want to get into maps into the capabilities of Excel. Depends on what windy path you are trying to take. So, what's the process of working in Excel and developing your skills, becoming advanced? Well, generally speaking, you start with a question or a data set. Maybe your boss comes into your office and goes, look, I got this file and I'm not sure. There's a whole bunch of stuff on it. It's a giant table and I don't know what to do with it. Can you look at it and tell me X, Y, Z about it? Can you figure out whether there's anything useful here? Or if you're a hobbyist of some sort, like I like sumo wrestling, I'm going to get a database of all the sumo wrestlers and all of their records and all their weights and heights and everything and put that together and see if I can generate anything interesting from that. So you get your question. As you become more advanced, you're better at coming up with questions. You're better with assessing your data set, exploring the field of what you're analyzing. You're better if you're a business analyst or a data analyst at cleaning your data set. I gotta say, I read somewhere that upwards of 60% of working in Excel is just cleaning up messy data sets. And I'm sure that you know if you send out surveys or if you've got a lot of information coming in from a lot of different people all at once, oh, people type in anything into open fields. And so cleaning your data set, summarizing it, understanding what it is highly important. And as you improve your Excel skills, you become you become better at understanding your data, tips for cleaning and organizing your data in a way for it to be used better. Once you've gotten better or are uh, more keen on cleaning, you go from understanding what you have to then visualizing how you can answer the question. That's really where we are with this class. We're moving from intermediate to advanced is about having a model of how Excel works in your head and being able to go, I really want to do this. I want to take this piece of information and make it this way. And then you may or may not know the specific function to use. Generally speaking, if you do something at work a lot, you'll have memorized certain functions. You'll know, but you'll be able to kind of visualize the formula. And at this point, if you don't know the function to use, or even if it exists, as long as you have a clear idea of what you want to do, taking it to the how is easier. You can Google it. You can use AI and just ask the question, oh, I have this. I want to make this column like this. How do I do? What's the formula to do? And it'll give you several options. Some of them may be wrong, but you'll be able to test them out. And because you've been working these things out yourself, you can then experiment and make it work. So you have a vision of what you want to do, and then you start to build. You use the resources that are available to you to bring in different functions, write different formulas, know where to click around in Excel to get what you want. You build it, and then it doesn't work. And then you figure out why it doesn't work. You come back out to the bigger picture, you go back down and tinker around, you make it work. And then your boss comes back in a few hours later, and you're like, boss, I got something for you. And they're amazed because they don't know how to use Excel, but they feel like you are an Excel master. And you are. You are an Excel master. So here we got a blank spreadsheet, and that's where we are at this moment. So having said all that, I didn't feel like organizing this class in kind of a traditional way was going to be useful. Because, of course, each of us have a different path into Excel advancement and have different questions that we're asking. So instead of demoing a project from beginning to end, because honestly, advanced projects take a long time. What I'm going to show you a little bit later took me hours, many hours to make. Of course, because I'm an intermediate moving into advanced person. So I'm learning, I'm building and experimenting and building again. So I'm not going to, we only have upwards of about an hour, maybe a little bit more for questions. So I'm not going to be able to build from what you see on your screen here to what you're going to see a little bit later. Instead, I'm not going to give you a list of functions because you can go to LinkedIn Learning classes, you can go to YouTube, get a lot of YouTube shorts or other TikTok short form content. By the way, if you're watching Excel videos on TikTok, I commend you. You're you're uh, you're a Excel a fan, and I like that. There's a lot of short form content that would be like, let me show you this cool function. There's plenty of that. Once I get through, in those kind of classes, you get through 5 functions, people are zoned out. Nobody's paying attention anymore. So I'm not going to do that. I will show you some function and I will show you some formulas, but it's not really about you memorizing those things or being able to sort of replicate exactly what it is. It's more about giving you a sense of what you can do and the way that you can move into that advanced level. So I'm going to give you some snapshots of the process. I'm going to show you the data set that I started with, kind of how I got it into some kind of form. I'm going to give you a tip for batching data so it shows up better in a pivot table. I'm going to show you a pivot table with some slicers. And then we're going to go through some formulas for at least one major big formula about how that project was work. And again, it's not really about you memorizing that formula. It's more about you getting an understanding of how you can nest things together, how you can build on the skills that you already have. So if you're still with me, let us get going. So for now, I'm going to exit this and we'll come back to this PowerPoint in a bit. I want to show you what we'll be working with. So it started with a question. The question was, what will people be interested in seeing? And I thought, well, a lot of people are interested in movies, right? We got a lot of cinephiles around, especially in the LA area, although people who come to our programs sometimes check in from all over the world. A lot of people are interested in movies. So I thought, okay, I downloaded a gigantic data set from Kaggle.com. I'm going to post that in the chat. Kaggle.com is a website for data science folks. There are a lot of free data sets available, very large data sets of on all sorts of topics that you can play and experiment with. So I downloaded a data set related to movies. It's actually a bunch of files. It was like 200 megabytes. It was sizable. The data set was originally in a zip file right here. So it was all of these files. There was ratings, there was credits, there was a bunch of things. I brought a couple of them together. This is the main one. As you can see, there's a column for the budget, there's a column for genre, and each movie has a unique identifier or ID. Uh, that's a whole column, and that's important to note because we're going to be using that. All of them have an original title, overview if you want a description of the movie, popularity. I don't know where they gained the popularity, but we're going to use that in a bit. There is a release date for each movie, revenue, and some other information. It's a very large data. Originally, there were 46,000 lines, 46,000 rows in this data set, which for those of you who work with large data sets already, that may not be significant, but I don't tend to work with data sets that are 46,000 lines. And so when Excel, the little wheel started to spin in Excel because it was processing my formula, I was like, okay, yeah, this is large. So the first thing I did was I thought, okay, I looked through the data set and said, what's regular and what's irregular here? And I cleaned it up a little bit. There were some lines that were irregular. They tended to be for movies that weren't very popular or were probably not going to play into what I was thinking about doing, which was to allow us to sort through movies for top tens in different decades and from different genres. So those unpopular movies weren't going to be. So I just got rid of them. I also got rid of movies that were not in English, which was around 13,000 rows, because oftentimes their titles were in characters that did not render properly. And so they weren't going to be useful for us because the characters were essentially in gibberish. They were not rendering the alphabets of other languages. And so we weren't even going to be able to tell what the title of the movie was. Also, I needed to simplify. So I got rid of those. And then I cleaned some other ones up. Um, the next thing I did was I started to kind of play around. I got my data set and then I brought in credits. So credits was a whole nother workbook. And I thought about using it as a separate file because I know that you're able to bring in variables and references. You're able to refer to other files. But I thought, I'm going to simplify also because I can just let you know that you're able to do that. And but for our purposes, I just decided to leave it in here. So what this sheet has is it has the cast for each movie. So in a structured, I think it's a JSON structure, so you can see each cast. There's a cast ID for each character, and there's a person who plays that character. So there's the name of the character. There's the name of the actor who plays that role, and there's some various other information here. So that's within the cast, and then the crew, the same idea. You can see this looks like total gibberish. You got to look closely to see the way that this is organized. So each little section that's separated by commas, each entry is separated by commas. Each entry has a credit ID. It has a department. Sometimes there's a gender. There's an ID for each person. There's the job, so original music composer, and then there's the name of the person or the company. In this case, Combustible Edison. I think it's probably the company. And notably, because I use this later, there is a director, name of director in here. It's right here, right in the middle. So there's job, as you can see, name, director. I'm showing you that specifically because I pulled this out later. And then, of course, there's the ID. And as I mentioned earlier, each movie has a unique identifier, and this ID corresponds with the ID right here. Okay, so then what did I do? I cleaned some things up. I added a couple of additional columns, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And I got this, Cinesearch. We have a pivot table here that shows just the top 10, and you can do that pretty easily by going into pivot table options. Actually, I think it's in the other place. You go to right click, you go to field settings. And I think where does it say? Oh no, it's the filter. Never mind. Sorry. You go to filter, and then you can filter by the top 10. So you go to filter values, and top 10. So this is a pivot table because I wanted to show top 10s. And this is all, the background is all black. This is a fancy font. That's all easy to do. That's all just aesthetics. Same thing with these slicers. Each of these are a slicer. In each slicer is also it's you can arrange the style of the slicer however you want. And so if we select the slicers themselves, we can go to slicer and we can arrange to make them. We can create our own, modify our own style for each slicer. So the font is Nordique inline, and this is a bright green font, bright green color. So then so I used the movies table here, and I organized a pivot table here. I use these as slicers, and so we can look at our different years. We can list by genre. So in the 70s, top 10 crime films by popularity, wherever they got that popularity rating. Badlands, Papillon, Taxi Driver, Conversation, etc., etc. And here are the revenues where there was data reported. In a lot of that table, there was no data reported. So for me, I grew up in the 90s. Let's remove the filter here. And these were the movies that I had when I was growing up, especially Shawshank Redemption. It was my favorite movie. It showed on TBS every 3 weeks or something, and I watched it every 3 weeks. And then, so we got this, we can sort and play around with this. And then once you figure out what you like, then I went here and created a little drop down for if we wanted to get a little deeper into the directors that directed those movies. So Frank Darabont is the director of Shawshank Redemption. And I click and then I wait because it's looking through all of those lines or all those rows in, I think it's 30,000 rows or something in that movie's movie sheet, and pulling out just Frank Darabont's movies, the release year of the movie, and then the revenue. And there's a little table here, or sorry, a little chart here that charts the revenue of those movies. And then here, this is what we'll be covering later. This is the text field. This comes from our parking lot. So here we're looking up. This is a formula that I'm not going to go over today, but I'll go over one that's similar. So what we're doing here is we're looking up. We've grabbed this. We look at these movies. We're searching for those movies in the original title field. We're grabbing the ID, the unique ID using XLOOKUP. And then we're going into credits and finding where that is here. Actually, it's the other way. We're first going here, we're finding the director, and then displaying the director's name, pulling out the director's name and displaying it here. And then from there, we use conditional formatting to create a list here. Now, I feel like at this point, I just went through something really quickly, and beginners are already going, I don't know what you're talking about. You lost me at and like 5 sentences ago. I hope intermediate folks are still a little bit with me. Advanced folks are like, you did it like that. You could have done it better. Um, so we so then we select the director. We can look at Steven Spielberg. There's a lot more movies. It's going to take a second to pull it out. And so I will show you how to do this right here. We've got some dynamic features here. The movies change, the dates of the first and last movie changes, and we'll go through that. But if you'll notice, so first of all, is everybody with me so far? Are we all okay at this point, or at least reasonably? Are we reasonably w- with it here? We're still interested. I gotta say, if you're some people are saying that they're still here to sense you, that this is more than intermediate. That's right. This is advanced topics in Excel. Uh, some a few mixed responses. Go, but I see most people are still here. All right, cool. So let me show you how I did a thing here, and we'll unpack some of these formulas. And this is really what we want to do. We want to unpack how some of these things work. So you see, I'm referring to many different things. I'm referring to many different rows and columns, and bringing the data all into one place that's expressed in kind of a neat way. So let's first start with like, we have this movie search, okay? But if you know about how slicers work, you know that bringing up years like this is not a possibility that you can just get from single years. So usually the way that this was organized originally was, you can see there's where's my release date? Release date is by year. I made it show up as year, but they're actual dates. You can see up in the formula bar that each release year is where it's reported is an actual date. I just made it the number type YYYY, made it a display by year. So it's a little bit neater. Now, if I just had this, we could do a timeline. We could create a slicer with a timeline. So I think that uh, if we wanted to do, we can insert timeline by release date. So I'm going fast, but right over here on the top, I clicked pivot table analyze. I clicked insert timeline and I hit OK. And I got this little timeline. Now we're going from 1900, which is actually the first date that Excel recognizes. Excel doesn't recognize dates before 1900, by the way. Um, if it converts dates from a serial number, and the first serial number is one, and one is January 1st, 1900. Uh, up until 2019, using a timeline for this, at least the way that Excel displays timelines, is well nigh impossible. We're going to be going through all the years in this way. It is very challenging. It would not be efficient. Let's get rid of this. I decided to do it a different way. Somebody mentioned in the chat, this is good that, actually, thank you for mentioning this, Ingrid. It's very difficult to see what he's doing. The screen is so small. Yes. So Zoom lets you actually zoom in. So there should be a little, I think it's depending on what version of Zoom you're using, it's on the bottom left-hand side. There's a little plus and minus. You can actually zoom in with them. So you can increase it so as big as you need to so you can see for yourself. I have it showing up small here. I can zoom in a little bit in here, but I can't make these letters and numbers bigger. These are just kind of going to be the way that they are. So if you do need to zoom in, um, Zoom allows you to do that. And I zoom in all the time when I'm chatting with my colleagues because sometimes these spreadsheets are tiny. And I wear glasses. Uh, okay, so we've got year. Somebody said, wow, I've never zoomed in on a Zoom. It's time. Today is the day. So we've got year. So how did I have it sort by year? Because it's not going to automatically do this. You have to actually create you have to create a separate column that puts your dates into ranges. And here it is. I created a new column called release range, and I wrote a formula to make that possible. The formula uses, so it basically grabs each year and then rounds it. That's what floor does here. It converts the date to a year using year, and it rounds it to the nearest tenth, it adds a 9, and it formats it this way. So I rounded, I created this row so that I can create that. But then how did I do that with the genre? As you can see, my genre column has a bunch of genre for each movie. And that would just be a nightmare to keep in a slicer because it's not going to slice. I mean, it's not going to, we can't just have this whole thing show up in a slicer. Pivot table is not going to take all this apart. But as you can see, I created another column here where I selected the very first genre where it's listed. Some of them don't have any listed. Uh, where I took apart and just grabbed the single genre. So how did I do that? All of these have different IDs, so I can't just count the characters and say it's the sixth character. That's where the genre starts. I'm going to show you. Here's the formula. It's not a super complicated formula, but it is useful to unpack. The reason is because it speaks to what we want to get into, and that's nested formulas. That's the secret. So I should note the text before and text after the functions we're using for this specific formula are only available in Microsoft Office 365. So it's the newest version of Microsoft Office or one of the newer versions of Microsoft Office. If you have an old version of Excel, you're not going to have text before and text after. However, there are ways to do the same thing using a combination of other functions. So let's get kind of into this, into what we have here. So uh, the purpose of our formula here was to pull out just the very first genre and put it into a separate column so that we could then slice the table in a pivot table by that genre. So how did I do that? I basically triangulate. I grabbed a piece of information. I grabbed a specific delimiter on one side, specific delimiter on the other side, and then I had them hug. If that didn't make any sense, it will in a few minutes. So let's break it down a little bit. I have a nest here to remind us that we're nesting functions. So sometimes the way that Excel has formulas in the bar is so confusing. They're all in a giant block with no spaces. There's a bunch of commas, bunch of quotes. Makes no sense. It's better to, if you can, make spaces and you have your own convention for spacing out your formulas. So they're easier to read. And if you have a big one, so they're easier, and we'll have a big one later. So they're easier to go through. So here we have text before, and within the text before is text after. So how do you organize text before? We start with our text. What are we actually looking for? And what we're looking for is the genre row, this right here. Sometimes these are very long. So we're looking for a genre row. And then the delimiter is that's the character we're going to use for, we're going to go look after. So you can see We're looking after that one. Our delimiter, as it were, is a single quote. The next, in this is the syntax of text after. This it's the same for text before, by the way. So delimiter is a single quote, and these are optional. The ones in brackets are optional. We used instance num. That's how many instances of this do we count before we grab the text after and remove everything before. So we counted 5 because I looked at this and I examined these all the rows, or I examined the rows that we needed to break out, and I thought, okay, I see that even though the amount of characters here is different, there's always the same amount of single quotes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After the 5th one, that's where our first genre begins. And so I counted the 5th one, and then I put the commas here because I didn't need these optional ones. And if it wasn't found, if there wasn't a quote, because the ones that didn't have any genre listed, it was just 2 brackets. So there wasn't any. So I put none listed. It would come up with non-listed. It would send back non-listed if there wasn't a single quote found. So next, so as you can see, that's this part right here, text before or text after, which is within text before. So then what we did, our text that we brought in to text before was this text after. So all we had now was this part right here. And we needed to, so we needed to grab what just the romance part. We need to identify this right here and bring in just this part. And that's what the text before. All we wanted was the text before it. And so we did the same thing here. We brought in our text was what text after spit out. And our delimiter here, I noticed, well, what we want is we want to get rid of everything after this brace here and the single quote. So I selected the combination of these, and said everything after that, goodbye. And see, I didn't need any of these options here. I didn't need instance num, match mode, or match end. But if not found, I also included not listed. I probably didn't need this last one. I probably could have just kept this one, but I included it anyway. If not found. And so all we had left after these two were done was romance. They hug in the middle. And of course, what we're all looking for is romance. And we removed this with text before. We removed this with text after. And we have romance left. Oh, this is a big one. So does that make sense? The way that these were nested within each other? Because I think that's clear. So the key here is, of course, that this, in Excel, the order of operations comes from the inside out. In mathematical operations, as you know, we have depending on the operator, the um, plus minus multiplication, division, and the sequence from right to left, left to right. That's the way that it operates. Within Excel, you go from inside out. So here we start with text after, and then we text after, then text before takes what text after spits out and uses that until it's done. Somebody asked in the chat, I'm not sure why the commas are there. It's because, so if we didn't need any of the optional, let me go back here. If we didn't need any of these optional areas here, then I wouldn't have included these commas at all. But because I needed only the last one, if not found, I needed to include these commas so that it knew that this was the last one. It was this last optional one that we were using. If I was only using match mode, then I would only need to put information right here. And I wouldn't have to include these commas or non-listed or anything. Um, but yeah, if I wasn't using any of these, then I would not have these commas here at all. Okay, so next, we're going to go big because you know what? Go big or go home. So here's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. So that was how we cleaned up some of our data. We're able to identify a single genre so that when we went to our movie search, we could then slice by that column and just get the musicals from 1940 and 1949. Trying to see if Phantom of the Opera, of course, recognize. State Fair. I think it's Rodgers and Hammerstein. Carousels. Oh, this is the 1950s, a classical time for musicals. Excellent. I haven't I haven't heard these in a while, and now I feel like I should. So that's the way we're able to batch the, these slicers and make it look neat like this. But how then, when we got back here, were we able to generate this line here, directed 33 full-length films between 1960, 1969, and 2016? I'm sure that there are numerous ways to do this, but I'm going to show you how I did it so that every time I select a different director, this changes. And honestly, actually, it's not that different from the way that this comes up. One feature like clam bake. All right, so let me show you how that happened. So we've got this here, and I'm going to open up this formula. As you can see, if I look at it here, it looks like a giant mess of symbols. We don't like that. We don't need it. We're going to make that neat. And by the end, probably in the next 10 minutes, you are going to understand what I have there and possibly be able to get ideas in order to do it yourself. My Excel is currently undergoing some difficulty. I'm going to press enter to get out of that cell because it's trying to make it work. And it's going through all of those rows in the other spreadsheet several times. All right, let me bring up this. Let's get into this. So our purpose in creating that line, in that formula, was to count the movies that each director did. So we select a director's name in that dropdown. We need to count the movies that director made, output that number, and then grab the year of their first movie, the year of their last movie, and input that each time a different director is selected. So this is the formula that did that. Again, it looks like a mess, and we're about to unpack it. So breaking it down a little bit more, we really have three different sections of this formula. So I have an example here, James Cameron, which is what we select from the dropdown, not part of this formula, directed 9 full-length films between 1981 and 2009. So these are the three things that we're pulling. We use the let function. We use two reasonably complicated XLOOKUPs. And then we finished our let function here with the sentence, with the actual text here. Yeah, let is not something that all versions of somebody mentioned that not all versions have let. I think let is probably one of the newer function, but let is actually not essential for this formula. I actually had it written differently before, almost the same. I just had one extra X lookup instead. I had an X lookup for the counts for each minimum and maximum year. So the let just saves a little time, makes it a little neater, but not a requirement for this formula. So we have three different sections here. If we go through, let's go from the bottom. So as you can see, this bottom here, count A, movie's title, etc. Will go from the bottom up. The bottom area here is very simply it's mostly just the text. We directed, so we have this string surrounded by two quotes. N combines a string, so like a text, just a bunch of characters all together. I may include a space here because we need a space right here. Count A tallies non-empty cells in a range. So we brought up movie titles, and I'll show you how we got movie titles. So this counts the number of movie titles that are returned from that X lookup. Then we have another ampersand. We have some more text, another text string, which is full-length films. I could have created an if statement to say if there was only one or less than one, if there was less than two, or if it equals to one, then it would just do film, and it would the string that would come out would be film, and if not, it would come out as films. I decided not to mess with that, so I could make it slightly more complicated. Um, so this is just text, another ampersand. Then I took the minimum outputs lowest number in a range. So whatever you put into it. So then I grabbed the year. Year is a function that reformats a date or a serial number, a date serial number, and just pulls out the year from that serial number and outputs the year. So I took the minimum year from movie years, which we'll talk about. It's another X lookup. And as you can see, I put these little nests here because these are nested. We got minimum year nested inside minimum, and this variable here nested inside year. Another end is another string, another ampersand, and so on. So then I didn't forget the period. That's this period right here. So it pulls out the minimum year, the maximum year. And now let's get into the part that's really, is it the fun part? So now let's get into how we got the first part. So these right here, movie title and movie years, were X lookups. Uh, X lookup is another newer Excel function. It replaces or at least joins VLOOKUP and index match in being able to use a specific uh, key to then pull data from an array and pull in the data from the same row of a selected array. An array is a group of cells altogether, similar to a range, but I don't think an array has to be contiguous. They don't have to be all together. A range is usually all together, whereas an array, I think, can be cells from a different place. So we've now let's look up this here. This XLOOKUP has several parts. The first part is this filter function with several other functions nested within it. And then we've got the movie's ID and movie's release date. Movie's data ID is the ID column from our movie's data sheet. And then the release date is same thing, the release date row from the movie's data sheet, which we saw earlier. It's that really, really long one. Let's get into how the X lookup here works, and then we'll move our way through it. So if you're not that familiar with X lookup uses three main parts. The first part of X lookup, that's this part right here, is the lookup value. What are we actually looking for? What do we want to find within an array? So what we're looking for here is we're looking for the director's name. So we're looking for James Cameron in that credits sheet, that giant, with those giant credits where it has all the people that were part of the crew of a movie. We're looking for just the director's name. And in some ways, we're doing that similarly to text before and text after, but indeed, we're using a filter. So we're filtering to just where we got the director's name in that column. And we're looking where we find the director's name, we grab the ID, which is the next column. So then where you're searching, we're searching in that credits crew column. We're searching for the director's name. It's the text string job. And then we're looking for the director's name. This is referring to that drop down. So James Cameron, and then comma, searching inside credits crew. So where we're searching, Bring that up. Where we're searching in movies ID. So then we bring up the ID of the director. We're searching inside the other sheet, movies ID. And then what we're bringing back, what we're sending back into our XLOOKUP is, or into our cell, is the release date. So we're getting the director's name, we're finding the movies, the ID of the movies, and we're sending back the release date of the movies. There's some other optional parts for XLOOKUPs, but we're not using those right now. So you can see, we're getting back the year of release. So within here, we've got this filter. We've got this filter function. Filter is a function that I just recently learned about, and it's kind of neat. It allows you to show a dynamic array, bring your table with some filters. So usually what we're used to when it comes to filtering tables is those little carrots that drop down, right? We get those little drop down carrots, we can select what we're looking for, and then the table will change just showing what we want. We can do that within the table with the carrots. We can do that in our ribbon. We can filter that way as well. The filter function allows you to do a similar thing within another part of your spreadsheet, either in another sheet or in the same sheet in different area, as long as it doesn't spill over, as long as you can fit what you're trying to bring up. So here we're looking inside the credits ID. We're figuring out if it's a number. So if it exists there, and then we're bringing back we're bringing back the those. If they're there, we're sending it back. And then XLOOKUP is then taking that. So it's nested within XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is taking that and doing the rest of its job. So XLOOKUP is getting a bunch of numbers. And we're testing out if it's a number. So is number. So if it's not a number, it'll bring back false. So there will be it'll keep looking. So next, so finally, we've got so our XLOOKUPs essentially work in the same way. We Here we're bringing back the release date, and then in the other one we're bringing back the name of the movie. So here, the first XLOOKUP is bringing back movie titles. The second one is bringing release dates. The idea of it is pretty much the same. It's using that movie ID to pivot from it's finding the director's name, grabbing that the movie ID, that, and then grabbing the movie ID, grabbing the title, and sending it back. And then finally, we use let to make it a little bit simpler. Let is a new function relatively recently introduced that allows you to define names and values just to make your calculations simpler. If I didn't have let, and the way I wrote it first is I didn't use let. What I did was I grabbed the what's what I didn't use let. I just had a bunch of X lookups within these strings right here, and it was kind of messy and very long. Let made it a little bit easier. I was just able to associate the words movie titles with this XLOOKUP, movie years with this XLOOKUP, and then here is the final one where there's no pair, is the calculation. And this it could be a simple calculation. So it could be like let, the word 5 equal, and the thing is 2 plus 2. And then here, let, the word, then name equal Mary or whatever from a list of names. And then here, the calculation would just be like Mary is 5 years old. The same idea here. It would just, but instead of typing the formula here, we would just use these variables or these associated names. So down at the bottom here, as you can see, directed, and then we use the ampersand like we used in the previous formula, count of movies, and it's relatively self-explanatory here. And of course, you'll get this presentation in a follow-up email. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into it, you will be able to. So hopefully now when you see this, it still looks complicated, but maybe you feel like it is slightly less complicated. Uh, Now we're moving towards the end of our presentation. I just wanted to share with you some potential next steps in your advanced Excel journey by asking, what does your advanced look like? I started off by saying that each of us begins in this middle area here as beginners, where we're just getting our legs, we're just getting into the cells. Then we start to get more complex with pivot tables, nested formulas, variety of functions. Then we each go our own way. So I hope through this presentation, you figured out what your way is or what way what your way could be. The next steps then would be to ask your questions. What do you want to use Excel for? What questions do you have to answer? And experiment with creating things, building. You take classes and watch videos. We've got classes from the library. LinkedIn Learning is wonderful. I recommend the videos of Oz de Soleil, who is stylish and also entertaining in his teaching. But there are many others. Just filter by intermediate, advanced, and I guarantee in almost every LinkedIn Learning class, there'll be something new. And LinkedIn Learning is, of course, available for free for you with your library card. You go to the library website, go digital learning, and there we go. You get your link to LinkedIn Learning. Then you ask more questions, you experiment again, you watch more classes, you search YouTube, you ask your Excel master friends, and before you know it, you become an Excel master yourself. And that is where I'd like to leave you. Now I'll take some questions if I can. I hope that this was useful and beneficial for you. And of course, you can always email me at okagan@library.lacounty.gov. And I'll send this to you in a follow-up email as well. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and open up the Q&A and we'll see if I can answer some of the questions. I might not be able to, but I'll try. Can you provide free Excel information if your free trial is expired? So I can't answer that question. I can tell you that you can access Excel for free at our libraries. Our computers have Microsoft Excel available for you for free. What is parking lot? Parking lot is just the name of the uh, is just the name of the sheet I had here with the director list. We're pivoted from pivot is not the technical term for it, where we grabbed this list and we used also text before and a few nested X lookups to grab the directors from that list. And then that list was then was used as conditional drop down here. Okay. Somebody asked, will you be able to receive the Excel workbook you worked on today? Unfortunately, I cannot send you this workbook because the file is too big. It's like 60 megabytes, partially because there's so many rows in these spreadsheets. But you can download the original data set from Kaggle and work on it yourself. And I'll put a link to that for you. I have a link to the actual data set. And the original data set is like 200 megabytes. So just know it's just a large file. The pivot chart was pre-created, right? The pivot chart was this one here. Oh, I see. This right here, the one with I think we're talking about this one right here with the revenues. Yeah, that was pre-created. I mean, I created that along with, so that pulls from here, from this table here, or this is it's a filtered list. It's a filter table. It pulls from that here, and then it generates the thing here. It generates the chart here. So it just pulls where the revenue is reported and plots it here. It's not a very useful plot in terms of exactitude because it doesn't have, I removed all the grid lines and everything. But yeah, I created this in advance. I don't understand what that's a absolute reference to this cell right here. So that when it pulls these, it doesn't pull down into these rows here. So it'll always refer to specifically this cell in this workbook, B3, when it pulls, when it tries to grab these movies. So that's the difference between relative and absolute references. Will you have more classes like these in the future? So we do have an advanced PowerPoint class coming up next month. Um, if you liked this class and you want to see more of them, put it in the post-event survey. If the folks out there want more advanced topics, classes on Excel, PowerPoint, Word, there's a strong possibility that we can do more, but you got to ask for them. That makes it easier to know what you're interested in, what level, how many people would be interested in it. I was hoping you'd go over dashboards. So this is a dashboard. I mean, this principles of dashboarding is exactly what you see here. This is a dashboard. It grabs information from a data set and it can dynamically update. So this one dynamically updates. So that dashboards have exactly the same kind of ideas. This is a chart that updates with information. So you just refer to different items in dashboard depending on what the key performance indicators that your business or you have. Would AI be able to solve any Excel problems? Sure. I used AI to help me with some of these formulas, just to know how to make them a little bit more efficient, or if there's any filters that would be better to use. So absolutely, yeah. But I wouldn't trust AI. I use Gemini for this, just FYI, Google's AI for the most part. But yeah, I would. You can ask AI your questions. Just make sure to try to be clear about what you need, and then the answer will be better. So, but again, you're gonna have to test it out anyway. Don't just ask A and then trust it and then turn it into your boss. Make sure it works and make sure it covers the edge cases that you have, depending on your data set. So where did you enter the large equation you just assembled in the Excel worksheet? Great question. Right here. So this is where the dropdown is, and in cell C3 is where that large formula was that we worked out. And here's where that sentence comes directed one full-length film between 1930 and 1930. There's actually another similar formula right here, also uses a let and brings in and filters. It uses the same thing, but just displays the table here instead of just turning it into itself into an XLOOKUP. Does Excel allow you to enter long nested formulas in a more readable format that you presented on your slides? Unfortunately, I mean, it does and it doesn't. So you can include spaces. Excel doesn't care about white spaces within the formula bar. So you can include as many white spaces as you want. And by white spaces, I just mean you can press, if you were right here, see this between this X lookup and everything, and I wanted to I press hold Alt, I press Enter, and I could, it could be like this, and it doesn't matter. It would work the same way. I could make as many spaces as I want, and it would work the same way. But uh, there's just not a lot of space here. I would love it if there was a plugin for Excel that did syntax highlighting, like in integrated development environment or IDs for programming, but I don't know if that exists. But yeah, it doesn't, you can create whatever kind of format you want as long as the characters are in the right sequence. Just want to say thank you for the tip on LinkedIn Learning videos. Would I need a LinkedIn account to access these? You would not. All you need is a library account, and Letty posted the information. Thank you very much. Letty posted the information for how to get to LinkedIn Learning in the chat. You don't need a LinkedIn account. That's totally optional. If you want to be on LinkedIn, do that. If you don't, you can access LinkedIn Learning with just your library card. All right, let me see. I don't have anything else in the Q&A. Let me scroll up and see if there's any other questions in the chat before we depart. See, we asked links to download the files or will be included in the emails. So I'm not going to include this file I mentioned before. I'm not going to include this workbook within the follow-up email. I will put a link to the Kaggle dataset that I used, the original dataset on Kaggle, where you can go and you can download it. I will send you a PDF of this presentation here. So you'll be able to examine this as needed. And I'll send you a link to a recording of this program, of course. If you're watching the recording on YouTube, hello from the past. Okay, let me see. I think that's it. If anybody else has any questions, now would be the time to ask those questions. And if you do not, feel free to respond to the follow-up email. I'm happy to answer your questions and help with your Excel quandaries if I could, if my skills are strong enough to help you. But I hope they will be. All right. I think we're at time. Thank you all very much for being here. I hope that this has helped you move a little bit farther, further, higher in your Excel journey. Letty, thank you for the introduction and for posting links in the chat and being there with your assistance. And to all, see you next time.